Welcome to another episode of Fame Factor by Skoob. I'm your host, Sonia Lambert, and today we're diving deep into the life of one of music's most notorious figures, a man whose very name conjures images of chaos, darkness, and absolute rock and roll mayhem. This is the story of John Michael Osbourne, better known to the world as Ozzy, the Prince of Darkness himself. But before we get to the bat-biting, dove-decapitating madness that made headlines around the world, we need to understand how a working-class kid from Birmingham became the most unpredictable force in heavy metal history. Because the truth is, Ozzy's story isn't just about outrageous antics and substance abuse. It's about survival, resilience, and how childhood trauma can shape a legend. Picture this: mid-1950s Aston, Birmingham, industrial England at its grittiest. In a cramped two-bedroom house lives the Osbourne family. 6 children crammed together while their father John Thomas works brutal hours as a toolmaker, and their mother Lillian toils away in a factory. Among these children is young John Michael, a boy who would unknowingly carry the seeds of both genius and chaos. But here's what most people don't know about Ozzy's childhood. It was a special kind of hell that would have broken most people. Young Ozzy was dyslexic, though back then, that term barely existed in educational vocabulary. There was no support, no understanding, no adaptive tools. Kids with learning disabilities were simply expected to figure it out on their own, and when they couldn't, they were labeled as lazy or disruptive. For Ozzy, school became a daily nightmare. The confusion and pain of struggling with reading and writing crushed his self-esteem. Teachers showed no empathy. They just saw a troublemaker. But the real horror came from his classmates. By age 11, 2 vicious bullies had targeted him, subjecting him to relentless physical and emotional torment that included humiliating acts so severe that even decades later, Ozzy would only refer to them vaguely as terrible. The psychological damage was devastating. By 14, this kid who would one day command stadium crowds felt so hopeless that he attempted suicide. And when his father discovered him, instead of comfort or understanding, John Thomas Osbourne responded with anger and violence. This was working-class England in the 1960s. Mental health wasn't discussed, it was dismissed. With no sanctuary at home or school, Ozzy dropped out at 15 and bounced between soul-crushing jobs. He worked in a slaughterhouse, an experience so brutal it would later influence the dark themes in his music. He tried being a plumber's apprentice, worked in a car factory, anything to escape the cycle of poverty and despair. But here's where desperation meets destiny. Feeling trapped and directionless, Ozzy turned to petty crime. He and his friends broke into shops and homes, stealing radios, televisions, whatever they could get their hands on. The problem? Ozzy was absolutely terrible at being a criminal. After a failed burglary, he was caught and sentenced to 6 weeks in Birmingham's notorious Winson Green prison at just 17 years old. That prison stint was a wake-up call. Embarrassed and shaken, with a father who refused to pay the fine that could have kept him out of jail, Ozzy knew he needed to change course. And that's when he remembered his fascination with the Beatles, particularly John Lennon. Music had always been there, lurking in the background of his consciousness. But now it represented something more: hope. With his meager resources, Ozzy bought a PA system and placed what would become one of the most consequential classified ads in rock history. Ozzy Zig, vocalist, owns own PA, looking for band. Fate intervened when this ad connected him with 3 other Birmingham musicians: guitarist Tony Iommi, bassist Geezer Butler, and drummer Bill Ward. They initially called themselves Earth, but soon evolved into something far more sinister. Black Sabbath. February 1970 changed everything. Black Sabbath's self-titled debut album hit the world like a sonic earthquake. This wasn't just music, it was a revolution. Those ominous riffs, occult motifs, and unrefined sonic texture created an entirely new genre that would become known as heavy metal. The album resonated instantly with disenfranchised youth, its dark and mysterious aura speaking to something primal and rebellious. Later that same year, they followed up with Paranoid, featuring massive hits like Iron Man and War Pigs. Black Sabbath wasn't just another rock band. They were the godfathers of an entirely new sound. For the next 8 years, they continued to shape heavy metal with influential albums like Master of Reality, Volume 4, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, and Sabotage. Ozzy had found his calling. His distinctive voice and wild stage presence made him the perfect frontman for this dark new sound. He married Thelma Riley in 1971, became a father to Jessica and Lewis, and adopted Thelma's son from a previous relationship. On the surface, it looked like the perfect rock star life: fame, family, and fortune. But beneath this veneer of success, something sinister was brewing. Success, as they say, is a double-edged sword, and for Ozzy Osbourne, it became a weapon of self-destruction. What started as occasional drinking and experimentation with drugs spiraled into a level of substance abuse that defied human biology. Picture this: Ozzy's daily routine included cocaine, Quaaludes, LSD, heroin, and excessive alcohol consumption. We're not talking about weekend partying. This was every single day. The rock and roll lifestyle provided a perfect storm of readily available drugs, enablers, and a culture that not only tolerated but celebrated excess. The numbers are staggering. Ozzy confessed to spending exorbitant amounts weekly on drugs and alcohol, rendering entire tours nothing but hazy memories of inebriation and lost consciousness. But addiction wasn't his only demon. He frequently engaged in extramarital affairs during tours, later acknowledging how his behavior made him a terrible husband and father. His habitual absence and emotional detachment, fueled by constant intoxication, prevented him from genuinely connecting with his family. While his life appeared glamorous from the outside, internally, he was spiraling into a vortex of personal ruin. He spoke of a pervasive numbness, using substances to mask unresolved childhood traumas and the crushing pressures of international fame. Within Black Sabbath, tensions reached a breaking point. While Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward certainly indulged in the rock lifestyle, Ozzy's behavior crossed into pure chaos. Recording sessions stalled due to his absences or incoherent contributions. His inability to maintain sobriety undermined their live performances. By the late 1970s, his creative input had dwindled to almost nothing. The end came in 1979, after nearly a decade of collaboration, following the troubled production of Never Say Die, an album that laid bare the band's internal conflicts. Tony Iommi made the difficult decision to dismiss Ozzy from Black Sabbath. For Ozzy, this wasn't just losing a job, it was losing his identity. Instead of serving as motivation for change, the dismissal deepened his destructive spiral. He isolated himself in a Los Angeles hotel, trapped in a grim cycle of substance abuse without direction or hope. This marked one of the darkest chapters in his life. But while Ozzy was battling his personal demons, a different kind of storm was brewing in America, one that would paint him as a literal agent of Satan. The 1980s brought what historians now call the Satanic Panic, a moral hysteria that swept across America like wildfire. At the center of this storm was Black Sabbath and their use of dark occult imagery. Their band name, the pentagrams, the inverted crosses, to conservative Christian critics, these weren't just theatrical elements. They were evidence of actual satanic worship. The opening line of their title track perfectly encapsulated this dark aesthetic. "What is this that stands before me? Figure in black which points at me." Ozzy's distinctive, eerie vocal style and dramatic performances made him the perfect target for those who saw rock music as a corrupting force. Geezer Butler, who penned many of the band's lyrics, later revealed that his Catholic upbringing made the concept of the devil particularly compelling to explore artistically. But to the moral guardians of the 1980s, this exploration was seen as literal devil worship, complete with accusations of hidden messages designed to entice youth into evil. The The hysteria involved law enforcement, evangelical Christians, psychologists, tabloid media, and supposed cult experts, all convinced of a vast network of satanic cults practicing ritual abuse. It was a paranoia rooted more in fear than factual evidence, reflecting broader American anxieties about the nature of evil itself. The irony was palpable. While society focused on imagined satanic threats from rock musicians, actual issues like institutional child abuse, including within the Catholic Church, remained insufficiently addressed. For Ozzy, the deployment of dark imagery was never about spiritual alignment. It was artistic expression, reflecting society's deepest fears through intense music and provocative performances. But it wasn't just the music that made Ozzy legendary. It was the absolute chaos that seemed to follow him everywhere. By the mid-1970s, Warner Brothers was so aware of the band's drug habits that they included $15,000 in their album budget specifically for drugs. Let that sink in. The record label was literally budgeting for their artists' substance abuse. While the entire band indulged heavily, Ozzy was in a league of his own. His daily consumption was astronomical, reportedly 4 liters of brandy daily, plus various drugs. His routine was to drink beer for breakfast and escalate from there. This led to behavior so outlandish they've become rock and roll folklore. Take the infamous Edgewater Hotel incident in Seattle. Ozzy, in his unpredictable state, caught a mud shark, brought it to his hotel room, placed it in the bathtub, and proceeded to gut it, spreading its innards around the room. This wasn't a one-off occurrence. This was Tuesday for Ozzy Osbourne. His first marriage to Thelma Riley was marred by incidents that bordered on the psychotic. In one drug-induced episode, Ozzy shot all 17 of Thelma's cats. Another time, he was found hiding beneath a grand piano with a loaded shotgun and a knife. He set chicken coops on fire and chased chickens with a sword. The infidelity with Thelma's friends was almost secondary to the sheer madness that had consumed his daily existence. Hotels learned to fear the name Ozzy Osbourne. He would engage in behaviors like smearing feces on walls and causing property damage that required complete room renovations. His erratic conduct became so extreme that it exhausted even his bandmates in Black Sabbath, men who were hardly saints themselves. Scientists would later examine Ozzy's genome and discover genetic mutations that indicated a heightened tolerance to drugs and alcohol. His biology might have been uniquely predisposed to withstand the enormous self-imposed stresses that would typically be fatal. This wasn't just rock and roll excess. This was a man whose DNA seemed designed for survival under the most extreme conditions. Now, let's talk about what might be the most bizarre moment in music industry history. An incident that perfectly encapsulates the intersection of Ozzy's chaos and corporate America's attempts to contain it. The year was 1981. Ozzy had been dismissed from Black Sabbath and was establishing himself as a solo artist. His debut album Blizzard of Oz had been successful, and CBS Records was preparing to promote his follow-up, Diary of a Madman. What should have been a routine corporate meeting became one of the most infamous moments in rock history. The scene, a sterile boardroom in Century City, Los Angeles. CBS executives in their suits, ready for what they assumed would be a standard promotional meeting. Then Ozzy Osbourne stumbled in, clearly intoxicated, the strong scent of brandy announcing his arrival before he did. Hidden in his coat pockets were 2 live white doves. His plan, as he would later reveal, was beautifully ironic. He intended to release these doves as a gesture symbolizing peace, a whimsical attempt to soften his Prince of Darkness image. It was actually quite thoughtful, in a twisted Ozzy sort of way. But here's where corporate protocol met rock and roll chaos. As the meeting commenced, a CBS publicist kept interrupting Ozzy, dismissing him before he could unveil his avian surprise. Frustration mounting, alcohol clouding his judgment, Ozzy reached into his coat, pulled out a dove, and in a moment of drunken defiance that would echo through rock history, bit its head clean off. The shock in that room was absolute. Picture it. Corporate executives in their suits watching a rock star spit bloodied bird remains into the lap of their colleague. this wasn't a concert stage. This was a business meeting in one of the most powerful entertainment companies in the world. But Ozzy wasn't finished. According to his autobiography, he then mimicked the act with the second dove, though he claims he only feigned biting its head off, eventually letting it fly frantically around the boardroom, adding to the pandemonium. Security intervened, the meeting dissolved into chaos, and Ozzy was removed from the premises. The fallout was immediate and severe. Sharon Osbourne, his future wife and manager, later recounted the stern ultimatum from CBS executives. "If you ever do this again, we won't release the album and we'll literally destroy you." It was a threat that carried real weight in an industry where careers could be ended with a phone call. What had been intended as a metaphorical display of peace transformed into an urban legend, unfolding in the most critical yet unanticipated of settings. The incident became one of the most lurid episodes in rock history. Remarkably, not on stage, where such behavior might be expected, but in a corporate boardroom known for spreadsheets and strategic planning. And here's the kicker. This spectacle was only a prelude. Less than a year later in Des Moines, Iowa, Ozzy would push the envelope even further when he mistook a real bat thrown on stage for a rubber toy and bit its head off. The misjudgment became immediately clear when blood filled his mouth, prompting a rush to the hospital for rabies treatment. Capitalizing on this notorious event, Ozzy later released a plush bat toy with a detachable head. Because if you're going to be infamous, you might as well profit from it. Despite everything, the addiction, the chaos, the near-death experiences, Ozzy survived. There were moments of reprieve, like his musical collaboration with guitar virtuoso Randy Rhoads and his marriage to Sharon Arden, which brought temporary stability. But tragedy struck during their Diary of a Madman tour, when Randy Rhoads died in a plane crash, a devastating event that nearly destroyed Ozzy completely. Yet somehow, he found the resilience to persist. His enduring legacy is as much about his improbable survival as it is about his influential role in shaping heavy metal. He survived levels of substance abuse that should have killed him multiple times over. He survived the moral panic that tried to paint him as a corrupting force. He survived his own worst impulses and the chaos that seemed to follow him everywhere. The truth about Ozzy Osbourne is that he's not just a rock star. He's a phenomenon. His journey from the slums of Birmingham to international stardom reads more like mythology than biography. He took the pain of a traumatic childhood, the desperation of poverty, and the chaos of addiction, and somehow transformed it all into art that spoke to millions of disenfranchised youth around the world. So that was Ozzy Osbourne. Not just the Prince of Darkness, but a dyslexic kid from Birmingham who turned pain, poverty, and addiction into art that rocked the world. But what if the craziest part of Ozzy's story isn't what you've heard, but what's still hidden beneath the surface? There's more to his journey than bats and black eyeliner. Stories of survival, transformation, and a fight against the odds that might just change how you see him forever. Download the Skoob app now to unlock the full story. Uncut, unfiltered, and unlike anything you've heard before. This is your host, Sonia Lambert, with Fame Factor by Skoob. Don't forget to download the app and see you on the next one.